This is a story from China, from the northern industrial cities where the winters are long and the factories have been closing for decades, leaving behind rows of empty apartment blocks and streets that disappear into fog after midnight. In cities like this, taxi drivers who work the night shift pass down rules that make no sense until they do. The one that matters here is simple. After 2:40 a.m., if a passenger pays cash, you take it. You never give change. What you hand back is never money. Joe Hai was 36. He drove a white Hyundai Elantra with a roof light where one letter had burned out. The city around him had been built on steel and coal, but the mills had gone quiet one by one, leaving soot-stained apartment blocks, rusting factory gates, and streets that emptied after midnight into a landscape of broken streetlights and black water. He had a wife named Lin Fang, a 7-year-old daughter named Duo, a car payment that never seemed to shrink, and a talent for calling his absence sacrifice. The afternoon before the ride, Lin Fang called while Joe was hosing road salt off his wheel wells. "Tomorrow at 9, she said. "The school open day, just show your face." Joe watched the dirty water run into the gutter. "If I lose half a day's fares," he said, "are you covering the loss?" The line went quiet. Then, "The teacher has asked twice if Duo's father drives long distance. She thinks that is why you never come." Joe ended the call. He did not need to work that Wednesday night. Fares would be scarce, and the old highway past the machine factory was under repair. But he did not want to go home. He did not want to sit at the dinner table while Lin Fang's silence filled the room, or watch Duo practice her poem while stealing glances at the door to see if he was listening. Driving was easier. Driving meant he was providing, and providing meant he did not have to be there. Rain started after midnight. Not a downpour, but the kind of autumn rain that clings to glass like grease and turns the city into a smear of yellow lamplight and black water. Joe's radio played an old pop song from 10 years ago, the signal breaking up into static that matched the rhythm of his wipers. At 2:35 a.m., he passed the turnoff for the machine factory workers' estate. 5 years earlier, a fire had torn through the complex, gutting half the residential block. One body had been pulled from the rubble. No one had ever claimed it. People who had seen it talked about the neck, how it had been sewn back together with thick black thread, the stitches still in place, as if someone had tried to repair a broken doll and then given up. The estate had been abandoned since then, fenced off with corrugated iron that had gone orange with rust. At night, the burned window frames looked like rows of empty eye sockets. Joe usually avoided this route, but the navigation app showed the main highway blocked by asphalt work. The detour added 12 minutes. He glanced at the meter, 2:39 a.m. He told himself he would take one more fare regardless of what came and head home by 2:45. At 2:40 exactly, his phone lit up with a text from an unknown number, "Old Machine Factory Crossing." To the estate 200 meters ahead, beyond the reach of the last working streetlight, a figure stood in the rain. The man wore an old gray raincoat with the hood pulled low. He did not raise a hand or step forward. He simply waited until Joe stopped, then opened the rear door and climbed in. The smell that entered with him was not the smell of wet cloth or mildew. It was the smell of iron filings pressed into wet concrete. Sharp, mineral, wrong. "The estate," the man said. Joe checked the mirror. He could see the passenger's jaw and throat. The skin was the color of old candle wax, mottled and dry. A line of thick black stitches ran across the neck, each puncture hole slightly swollen, the thread disappearing beneath the raincoat's collar. Joe looked back at the road. He did not want to confirm what he had seen. The car's heater was blowing, but the temperature dropped. Joe adjusted the dial, then adjusted it again. The vents produced nothing but the smell of the dashboard heating up. In the mirror, he caught the rear floor matte darkening. A wet patch the size of a dinner plate sank into the gray fabric, heavier than rainwater, leaving the fibers matted down as if something thick had been pressed there. The wipers scraped back and forth. The road was pocked with potholes full of black water. Joe kept his eyes on the yellow line. At the gate of the estate, the meter stopped at 44 yuan. The passenger extended an old 100 yuan note from the raincoat pocket. The bill was impossibly dry, crisp, almost brittle, as if it had been baked in an oven rather than carried through rain. Joe opened his change box. He counted out 56 yuan, 150, 15, and a 1 yuan coin. He twisted around and held the money out. "Your change, 56. The man did not lower his hand. The 100 yuan note remained in the air between them. Joe's patience, already worn thin by the argument with Lin Fang and the empty roads, snapped. He leaned farther back and pushed the bills and coin toward the man's palm. "Take it," he said. "It is change. That is all." The fingers that closed around the money were cold and soft, like paper that had been soaked and then partially dried. As the coin touched the bills, it made a sound too bright for the quiet car. "Are you sure you want to exchange it?" the man asked. The voice came from deep in the chest, each word separate and heavy. "It is change," Joe said. "Just take it." He let go. The man withdrew his hand. He opened the door, the raincoat scraping against the seat with a sound like sandpaper on bone, and walked through a gap in the fence. He did not look back. The gray raincoat melted into the shadows of the burned buildings. Joe looked down at the 100 yuan note in his hand. The color drained from it. The portrait of Mao faded, then vanished entirely. In its place, vertical columns of characters appeared, and in the center, a palace with tiered roofs. It was spirit money, paper currency Chinese families burn for the dead, so that ancestors have funds in the afterlife. Joe had watched his mother burn stacks of it at Qingming every year, but she had never held a bill that transformed in her hand. He dropped it. When he bent to pick it up from the floor mat, he found a receipt in his other hand. He had not picked up a receipt. He had not pressed any button. The paper was thin thermal paper, the kind that curls at the edges. The font was wrong, too narrow, too precise, produced by a machine older than his own printer. He read it under the dashboard light, settled. Paid by Joe Hai. Received by blank. Still owed, one under the roof. Joe crumpled the paper and threw it out the window. It landed in a puddle and floated dry and white while rain struck the water around it. He drove over it. The tires made a sound like crushing eggshells. He reached his apartment building at 3:20 a.m. The hallway light was broken. He climbed the stairs in darkness, his key trembling against the lock. Inside, the apartment was silent. Lin Fang and Duo were asleep behind closed doors. Joe went to the bathroom, took the spirit money from his pocket. He did not remember retrieving it from the floor, and flushed it down the toilet. The paper spun in the water, refusing to sink for 3 full rotations before it disappeared. He lay in bed until dawn, listening to the rain. The next morning, he took his first day off in 3 years. He went to Duo school himself, standing at the front of the parent crowd, watching every child who came through the gate. When Duo saw him, she ran over, her backpack bouncing. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Taking you home," he said. He took her bag. His hand stayed on her shoulder all the way to the car. He kept her inside for the rest of the day. That evening, instead of going out to drive, he sat in his mother's living room with Duo coloring at the coffee table, and called an old man he had not spoken to in 2 years. Old Ma had driven trucks for the state transport company, then taxis for 20 years after that. He was over 70 now, his hands swollen around the knuckles, his apartment smelling of oolong tea and the specific silence of someone who had spent too many nights alone. Joe found him on the 4th floor walk-up, sitting by a window that looked out at the same factory chimneys he had watched for half a century. "Ma," Joe said. He did not sit down. That rule about not giving change after 2:40. How real is it? Old Ma did not look at him. He poured tea into a cup with a hairline crack in the glaze. You gave change, 56 yuan, and he took it. I forced it on him. He asked if I was sure, and I told him to take it. Old Ma set the teapot down. The ceramic clicked against the glass tabletop. Show me the ticket. Joe pulled the receipt from his pocket. He had thrown it away 3 times, out the car window, into a trash can at a gas station, down a storm drain. And each time it had reappeared in his pocket, the paper smooth, the creases gone, as if it had been waiting for him to need it again. Old Ma held it up to the window light. He read the 4 lines without moving his lips. Then he laid it flat on the table and pushed it back toward Joe with one finger. One under the roof, Old Ma said. What does it mean? Old Ma's eyes were cloudy, but they fixed on Joe with something that was not blindness. It means the house is full. The receipt knows you have people under your roof, a wife, a child, a mother. It doesn't name them yet, but the debt is marked. How do I stop it? You don't. Old Ma picked up his tea. The steam rose between them. Don't ask which one. Don't even think the name's too loud. The receipt listens. The moment you try to choose, the moment you think, take her instead of the child, it knows, and it takes the one you were trying to keep. Joe stared at the receipt on the table. What if I leave, take my daughter, and go somewhere else? Old Ma shook his head. The roof follows the name. You can run to another province, and the debt will sit in that room too. The only thing that changes is how long you have before it collects. Joe left the apartment. The stairwell smelled of fried garlic from the neighbor's kitchen, normal and alive, and the contrast made his hands shake. He took Duo to his mother's apartment, on the other side of the city. His mother was a small woman who asked few questions. She simply made up the spare bed and told Duo there was watermelon in the refrigerator. Joe told Lin Fang the car needed major repairs and they would stay for a few days. She did not argue. For 3 days, Joe became a shadow of a father. He walked Duo to school in the morning, picking routes that avoided the old highway entirely. He waited outside her classroom until the lunch bell. He sat in his mother's living room with the television on low, listening to the hallway, the stairwell, the street below. His mother watched him from the kitchen but said nothing. On the second afternoon, she found him checking the locks on the windows for the 3rd time. Is someone after you? She asked. No, Joe said, just making sure. She nodded and went back to her cooking, but he noticed she double-locked the front door that night. The first night, he checked Duo's backpack while she slept. Her notebooks, her pencil case, her water bottle. Nothing extra. He allowed himself to breathe. The second night, his mother woke him at 3 a.m. She stood in the doorway of the spare room, her robe pulled tight. Duo was in the kitchen, she said. I heard the refrigerator open. Joe went to check. Duo was asleep in the spare bed, her breathing even, the blanket pulled to her chin. But on the kitchen table, in the center of the wood grain, lay the 56 yuan. The 50 and the 5 were dry and flat. The 1 yuan coin sat on top, and when Joe touched it, it was so cold, it burned his fingertip. He wrapped the money in a napkin and threw it down the building's trash chute. He stood there for 10 minutes, listening to the darkness inside the shaft. Then he went back to bed. The 3rd night, he did not sleep. He sat in the living room with the lights off, watching the street through the window. At 2:30 a.m., a white car turned the corner 2 blocks down. Joe's chest tightened. The car moved slowly, its headlights off, and passed the building without stopping. It was not his Elantra. It was a Volkswagen. He watched until its taillights disappeared, then sat in the dark until his mother's clock struck 4. By the 4th evening, Lin Fang called. Her voice had softened. The car can't take that long to fix. Duo has exams next week. Come home. Joe said yes. He told himself the 3 days had been enough. The money had appeared, but he had removed it. The car on the street had been a coincidence. He was a rational man who had let an old driver's superstition and a strange fare rattle him. He packed Duo's bag himself, checking every pocket. That night, he slept deeply. No dreams, no sounds. At 2:39 a.m., his phone vibrated on the nightstand. He reached for it without opening his eyes. The screen's glow hit his face. Pick up Duo's school. Destination, Old Machine Factory Estate. Passengers, 1. Payment, change already given. 2:40 a.m. Joe was out of bed before his mind had finished reading. The floor was cold against his feet. His mother's apartment was silent, the clock on the wall showing 2:39, then 2:40 as he watched. He ran to Duo's room. She was in bed, the blanket rising and falling with her breath. He grabbed her shoulders and pulled her upright. "Dad," her voice was thick with sleep. "Dad, you're hurting my arm." "I'm here," Joe said. He held her against his chest, feeling her heartbeat, her warmth, the solid reality of her. "I'm right here." Then he saw her school bag on the chair. Duo, he said. "Check the inside pocket, the hidden one." She reached in without complaint, her small fingers probing the lining. She pulled out a fold of bills and a single coin, 56 yuan. The 50 and the 5 were dry and stiff. The coin was so cold that Duo dropped it onto the sheet, then picked it up again, frowning at her own fingers. "I didn't put this here," she said. "It wasn't there when I went to bed." Joe took the money. It felt exactly as it had in the car 4 nights ago. "Dad," Duo said. She looked at him with clear eyes, her hair tangled against the pillow. "That man asked me a question." Joe's mouth went dry. "What man?" "The one in the raincoat," he asked. "Who was taking me to school today?" Joe looked at the phone still clenched in his hand. The order was still on the screen. He looked at the pickup location again, and this time he read it not as a father but as a man who had grown up in this city. Duo's current school was in the east, built last year. But the address in the order was not that school. It was Machine Factory Primary School, the school Joe had attended as a boy. The school that had stood inside the workers' estate until the fire 5 years ago burned it to the foundation below. In the street came the slow groan of a car door opening. Joe pushed Duo into Lin Fang's arms. She was awake now, standing in the doorway, asking questions he did not answer. "Hold her," Joe said. "Lock the door, don't let her out of your sight." He ran. He took the stairs 3 at a time, his bare feet slapping the concrete, the sound echoing up the stairwell. He burst through the building's front door into the rain. The white Elantra was at the curb, the rear door hanging open, the interior light casting a pale glow on the empty back seat. The keys were in his pocket, but the car was here, waiting, the engine cold and silent. Joe ran toward it. He would slam the door, pull the battery cable, break the window with a brick from his mother's garden, anything to stop the car from being ready. Rain ran into his eyes. His foot slipped on the curb and he caught himself with one hand against the hood. The metal was warm, though the engine had not been running. His hand was on the door handle when his phone vibrated again. He looked down. The order had changed, completed. Joe looked up at the 3rd-floor window. Duo stood at the glass. Lin Fang was behind her, pulling at her shoulder, calling her name. Joe could see Lin Fang's mouth moving, but no sound reached the street. Duo did not turn. She stood perfectly still, looking down at the 1 yuan coin in her palm. The rain fell past her face, though she was inside. Though the window was closed, Joe shouted her name. Inside the taxi, the meter ticked once, from 0.00 to 44.00, and stopped.